Hey, it's Kate of Real Life Fit by Kate, and I just want to talk to you today real quick about a mindset shift that can be really super helpful. It's kind of going from the extreme of all or nothingness to getting into a more consistent pattern with both eating or working out, whatever it is that you kind of struggle with being consistent with. And it's the idea of changing from a light switch kind of approach to things where you're either on or you're off over to something where you're like turning the dial up and down on the volume. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we get into these patterns of behavior or thinking that we have to be perfect all the time. We have to be right on our workout plan. We have to be right on our eating plan. Or we set these big goals for ourselves. And then once we've accomplished that goal, we're like, oh, we're done. Whether that's like a weight loss goal or whether that's a sport and performance goal, like you train for a certain run or a certain event, and then you're like, oh, it's done. Well, I guess I'm done training, things like that. And then also sometimes I'll find, and I used to do this myself all the time, and it's been hugely helpful to get away from this mindset of, hey, I lost weight, or I got to a certain degree of leanness. I like my body composition, or I can now wear this size, or I lost this many inches, and okay, great. Now I get to quit. Now I get to stop doing what I'm doing and go back to whatever else, the normal way of doing things. And this can be really self-defeating because when we're constantly sort of doing the on and off thing, then we struggle. We're like never ever there, or we're only there for just a moment. And then we backslide, and then we feel bad about ourselves, and then we have a hard time finding the motivation again, and we question ourselves. And it's all pretty avoidable if we go from the end of the continuum where it's on again, off again, light switch again, to more like turning up the volume, like on, an old receiver stereo, I don't know, where you actually had a knob that you turned and not just a button you pushed. Yeah, I'm old school like that. And so at times in our lives, we're going to be cranking up the volume. We're training for an event, or everything is kind of lining up in our life and going really well. And so we're able to really hit the gym hard, lift heavy weights, perform at like this peak level. But the thing we got to realize is that peak level of performance, we cannot maintain that like constantly. So there are going to be times where we have to turn down the volume. We have to kind of dial it back a little bit, dial back our activity level, because either we get sick or something comes up, or we train for that event and then the event's over. So then we get to come back down a little bit more into like what I would call a maintenance mode. And so we're turning the volume, up and down to accommodate our life. Or if we get sick, we turn it way down and just look to keep a little bit of movement in there while we're healing or while we go through a difficult phase and things like that. So that idea of turning the volume up and down on the activity level can also apply to how we eat, because we know that sometimes we are eating for a certain goal, whether that's performance based, whether that's body composition based, where we are, our attention to our nutrition, our attention to detail there is up at a 10. It's like 9, 10, we are 90% of the time doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing with that little 10% wiggle room that most of us need to have at least. And then we reach that goal and we can turn that volume back down into, again, what would be more like maintenance mode, so that you're doing well 80% of the time, and 20% you've got like, your fudge factor on your treats and other things like that. But there are also times where we go on vacation. So that's where we want to also avoid that all or nothing, where again, light switch, up, down, on, off, like I'm on vacation, so woohoo, I can just do whatever I want to, it's no big deal. Instead of that, we can just turn down the volume on our attention to detail on our nutrition. Just hang in there, keep the big rocks. Think protein forward, think veggies forward, think get enough water before you have the fun beverages that are, have other stuff in them. And so that way we're not constantly struggling and to get back to perfect, and we don't feel bad about ourselves because we've fallen off the wagon, so to speak. We just gotta turn down the volume, and then when we're ready to get back at it again, we turn the volume back up. So that way we're not struggling with that all or nothing, off, on, start, stop thing that just gets to suck a lot of our energy, and it also kind of makes us feel bad about ourselves when we get in the middle of that pattern. So instead, think turn down the volume, turn up the volume, as is kind of going along with how your life is at the moment. Try and stay away from the light switch thing. Get more into the turn it up and down, go on that continuum of behavior, knowing that, 10 is that extreme on and 0 is that extreme off. And we kind of usually want to hang out in the middle somewhere, in the 5 to 7, 8 range, if you want to think of it that way. So at any rate, if this gels with you or if this kind of resonates with you, let me know. If you think this is helpful, let me know. And if you think I'm like so completely, totally off base, hey, I'm always interested in hearing other people's opinions and views too. So that's it. Have a great day. And try that mindset shift of turning up and down the volume instead of flipping the light switch.